Okay, good morning. This is Axel Merk, President and Chief Investment Officer of Merck Investments. A few seconds early, Dr. Fauci is going to testify, and there's going to be several opening comments. So I'll try to wrap up by the time he is starting to speak, in case somebody wants to listen to it. I have a bunch of things I want to talk about today. Very quick though on the markets. Nothing too exciting here. S&P futures are currently down 3 points. The 10 years up 2 ticks. The 30-year 17 ticks. The 3-month Fed funds rate is at the 3-month treasuries are at 11 basis points. The 3-month LIBOR rate is at 43. So that gap is still there. Effective Fed funds rate is at 5 basis points. The VIX curve is not inverted, has not been now for a little bit, meaning that the fear priced forward into the market. The future is more uncertain than the present. That's kind of the normal sort of environment. Um, in Europe, the Euro Stoxx 50 is flattish. The FTSE is up 1%. The DAX is flat, so not much movement here. Similarly in Asia, not major moves. Australia was down 1%. And gold, to get that out of the way as well, up $10 at 17.08 in the spot market, at 17.13, up $15 in the futures. And the crude oil West Texas is now at 25.40, up 5%, and Brent at $30. So the one of the big things in the news today is that the Federal Reserve is starting to buy ETFs today. Those are, is my understanding at least, not equity ETFs, but corporate bond ETFs. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think at this stage it's investment grade, but it may also be junk. They at least are able to. It's my understanding. And the point here why they buy ETFs is because the Fed's job is not to conduct fiscal policy. And when you provide the kind of influence money supply, that is monetary policy. But the moment you start allocating money to a specific sector of the economy, that's in the domain of Congress, and the Fed should stay out of it. Indeed, the moment you start buy mortgage-backed securities, you're already conducting fiscal policy, in my book anyway. But the way that the Fed is trying to address that conflict of interest is to go and buy the ETF, because the ETF is a basket of bonds, and then they cannot be accused of buying helping specific bonds. I guess that argument has been made by other central banks, and it's kind of accepted in the market. I don't like it, but that's what they're doing now. So that's worthwhile pointing out. The other point to discuss this morning. Yesterday, I heard Kamala Harris, the front runner to be a potential vice presidential candidate for Biden, on a local radio station interviewed, and she was talking about the sort of stimulus that we need, and she was elaborating about $2,000 per adult, making less than $100,000 per month as long as the pandemic lasts. As many are aware, Congress sent a $1,200 stimulus um, per adult, and then additional money if there were dependents and other items, a one-off payment. And the challenge with all these payments is that they don't get you very far. Right? I mean, they might get you some food on the table for the next week or two, or maybe month, or where you live, depending on your lifestyle, whatever it may be. But they don't get you very far. And they cost an awful lot of money. If you add them up by the tens of millions or however 100 million people, you're getting a good chunk of change. So you're talking about trillions in stimulus. And this morning as well, somebody on Bloomberg talked about, oh, inflation is down, we have to avoid there's deflation, and we need to spend money to help people aid. And we need, if it's only 2 trillion stimulus, it's not enough. We need a 3.5 trillion and whatnot. Let me just make a note to talk about the CPI as well, because I have a gripe with that as well. But no, so uh, uh, absolutely, we need to find ways to help people. But the way to help people is to give them a job. Now, what is most unfortunate, and that's why I'm also interested in listening to what Dr. Fauci will have to say, is that the debate is about open versus close. It is about how to get people safely back to work. We saw this now in South Korea, apparently in a nightclub. There was some infections, and they're going to scramble to track down and eliminate the kind of the flare. Well, South Korea can have much better controls in place. In Wuhan, apparently, there are stories out that they are trying to test 11 million people there now because they have a little bit of a flare. We in the US are just too decentralized. We can't do that. So we got a choice of we can kind of swim along and have these medium flare-ups, and we just got to deal with them, or we try to be something more rigorous. I would just think that if you spend $2,000 a person per month, you can do a lot to get people to go back to work safely. And so to pay them to be at home and um, that's a to me that's just going to bankrupt the country and is not going to do anything to get us back working again. We can't do that until we find a vaccine, because maybe we'll never find a vaccine, right? The Brits have said that we have to take that scenario into account, and I think that's absolutely right. So we got to learn how to live with this, and the way we do it is not by just hunkering at home and watching Netflix all day. Um, John Farrow on Bloomberg this morning said that there are no internships available, and and what are the kids going to do? And said that his college age, I think, child is going to take some summer classes. Well, yes, there is absolutely no excuse for any college kid or anybody for that matter to be a couch potato. So I happen to be lucky that I have a daughter who actually has an internship for the summer. It's going to be remote work, and so well, that is fantastic. And but even if one doesn't have a traditional type of internship, yes, you can take online classes. You can do all kinds of things. I mean, let's say being in college means using your brain. You've got to use something useful with your brain other than playing Minecraft. Although I do understand that I think my oldest, I think he developed a calculator using Minecraft once, many years ago. So I guess you could do something useful with those things as well. But the same really applies to everybody else as well. Um, we got to do things, and there are obviously many people who are out of a job and are suffering quite a bit right now. But they're entrepreneurs. I had somebody stop by my gate. I was fiddling around with actually the door phone camera, and had a broken wire and an Ethernet cable. And I happen to be a techie that likes playing with this stuff. And so I call him a local entrepreneur, stopped by and said, "Hey, I can help you with this." The guy wanted to have a job, and sure enough, it was sufficiently essential work to get the internet up, I suppose, that he was allowed to work, and so he helped me, and clearly that's not going to make up for all the salary he's lost, because other bigger job opportunities are not available for a few bucks that he makes helping me for a few hours. Um, but we all have an obligation to try as hard as possible to make the best of the situation, whichever situation we be in, and especially if you are a kind of a mind worker, like somebody who works with your mind, you can do all kinds of things with your mind. And so to just paying people to be idle is, in my view, the wrong approach. We got to incentivize people to work. And on that note, on the broader policy side, on the one hand, we should get people to find out how to work, and then enable people to work. If you look at what's been happened ahead of this, before this crisis, as you may recall, long-term bonds were negative in some countries, very low in the US. That's a result of some real structural issues, and it's not an aging population. That may be a contributing factor. It is that red tape is killing production. So we got to find ways to incentivize people to invest. And so those are, of course, very different sort of policy choices than writing people a check. And it's not about taking a band-aid off or this or that, but there are some bigger things we can do. Anyway, enough of that rant. Let me do a quick rant here on the CPI. Consumer price inflation was down last month, and people say, "Oh my God, there's going to be deflation." Well, I have news for you. There are some people who have always been critical of inflation. This time around, we know the CPI is just plain wrong. The CPI is supposed to reflect our consumption basket. And there's always an argument that there's no such thing as the average person. But this time around, there's really no average person because we didn't drive, right? Fuel prices have plunged, dragging the CPI into negative territory. Well, we don't drive. So kick that thing out of the CPI, or at least discount it accordingly. Now, you cannot do that because you don't have enough data to know how much you should discount it and whatnot. So what ends up happening is that in order for the consistency of the data series, we keep it, but we should all be aware that this number is useless right now. And so we all spend a bigger proportion on our consumption on food, and food prices were up significantly, right? Or gloves or whatever it may be. And so a lot of these things, prices are distorted, and there's no way these statistics can properly reflect that. And we should at the very least be cognizant and honest about it, to realize that these numbers are not right. Now there is a threat, there is a danger that obviously, as we subsidize production to stay up, the prices will indeed come down. And so in that sense, all these best efforts to open up, keep businesses afloat that would have tanked otherwise, that may well get prices to plunge, and might de-anchor inflation expectations on the downside. And then, of course, as we keep pushing and pushing on the tail end of that, we might well de-anchor inflation expectations on the upside. And so that's the kind of the lack of stability is, I think, something worthwhile. And then I've mentioned this on this live broadcast before. We have to be really, really careful about when we talk about inflation. Inflation is not something that uniformly raises all the prices. What it does is we have issues here and there popping up. Just remember, I have to put up some disclosure here. Let me get that out of the way. There's going to be a flare up in one point or the other, and then of course there's going to be a government reaction and saying, hey, wait a second, we got to do something about it. So right now, it appears that this election theme is going to be, hey, China is the problem, and so we will probably impose something on China and create higher consumer prices here and there. And then, fear not, government regulation is going to jump in and control prices elsewhere. We had that in the 70s. And if you don't think it's going to happen again, well, we'll see. We'll find out. I mean, with all this panic that's going on, we might well have government instituted infrastructure projects around the world, pet industries being favored. And we'll see that in various countries. I wouldn't be surprised to see that in the US as well to some degree. And so good luck with the efficient capital allocation and whatnot. And so we'll see what the fallout is. Anyway, enough of a rant this morning. And give me some feedback, whether you like to have more of the data part or more of the ranting part, whichever one you prefer. In any case, let's listen to Dr. Fauci here, and stay safe out there. Take care. Bye.